Today's study is going to be about the 11th chapter of Daniel, which is one of the most difficult chapters to interpret because it's very historical and you have to know the detailed history of the coming of the Greeks under Alexander into the area of Palestine and the invasion of Alexander himself of Judea. And he actually made peace with the kingdom of Judah when he invaded. But this resulted in constant conflict, wars between the Greeks and the Judahites of Judea, and conflicts among the Greeks themselves, and then later conflicts between the Greeks and the Romans, who followed hard on the heels of the Greeks, and who in turn also invaded Judea and made life difficult for the kingdom of Judah at that time, led by the Maccabees. So we're going to go through chapter 11, which covers this period of history from the invasion of Palestine by the Greeks to the last moments of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was the last Greek king to dominate over the Judahites of Judea. Okay, so in Daniel chapter 11, verse 1, it tells us this. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. This is the Archangel Michael speaking. And he empowered Darius the Mede, and it's actually the Medes and Persians who were able to effect the release of the Judahites back from the Babylonian captivity and enabled them to come back to Jerusalem and rebuild the city walls and to reestablish the faith in Jerusalem. And so this is Yahweh telling us that he is actually the one who strengthened Darius the Mede. Now he was followed by several other kings. Verse 2. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, because the Medes and Persians were a combined kingdom. And the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Okay, so we're talking about still the Persians here, the Medes and Persians, and we're talking about actually 4 kings who followed Darius the Mede, or Darius the First. So Darius the Mede would be Darius the First, and he was followed by Xerxes I, who was followed by Xerxes II, then Darius II, and then Darius III, who was the one who was defeated by Alexander at the Battle of Issos. So here we have, in very concise terms in these first 2 verses, telling us about the 4 Medo-Persian kings who would make war against the Greeks and then ultimately be defeated by Alexander the Great. And verse 3 says, And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And this is Alexander the Great. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So it's telling us there's going to be all kinds of chaos resulting from Alexander's death. And so those 4 kingdoms spoken of here in verse 4 are and his 4 successors. The generals of Alexander's army took over 4 separate territories and ruled over them for a considerable amount of time. However, they fought amongst themselves, and they fought against other tribes and nations, including Egypt, the Moabites, the Edomites, etc., etc. So Ptolemy was the king of the south. He was the king of Egypt. He was the successor of Alexander, who took control of Egypt. Seleucus I was the general who took over Syria. Cassander took over Greece, and Lysimachus took over Thrace, Thrace being to the north of Greece and just north of the Aegean Sea, between Asia Minor and Greece. Okay, so those are the four kingdoms as history records the breakup of Alexander's kingdom into four kingdoms. So this is all very historical, very accurate. And it says, and the king of the south shall be strong. That is the Ptolemy, the king of Egypt, shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion, talking about the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, which ended with Cleopatra and Antony. So it lasted several hundred years under these Ptolemaic Greeks. So now, but it's also telling us that the Seleucid kings will become more powerful than these kings. So the king of the south is Ptolemy of the south. The kingdom of the north is the Seleucid kingdom, or Syria, under the Seleucid dynasty. So verse 6, and in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. So in other words, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids would have a treaty of peace for a certain amount of time, and the Ptolemaic king will give his daughter, Cleopatra I, to the present Seleucid king. Okay, so this would be Bernice, daughter of Ptolemy Philadelphus, was married to Antiochus Theos, the third king of the Seleucids. So this was a time of peace between the two succeeding generals of Alexander's army. Okay, so we continue with Bernice, and unfortunately there was strife had to continue between these two kingdoms. Verse 7. Let's turn the page here. Verse 7. But out of a branch of her roots, that is Bernice, we're talking about Bernice, out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. Well, this was Bernice's brother, and Bernice's brother was Ptolemy Euergetes, who conquered the reigning king of the Seleucids at this time. So Seleucus II was defeated by Ptolemy III, that was also Ptolemy Euergetes, thus avenging the death of Bernice. So what happened was that Ptolemy Euergetes, who was the brother of Bernice, was avenging the death of his sister, who was killed by Seleucus. Okay, so you have this inter-family squabbling now that precipitates war between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And this area of warfare continued until the destruction of the Greek Empire altogether. So let's continue here. And verse 8, and also shall carry captives into Egypt their gods with their princes and with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. In other words, the king of the south, the Ptolemaic kingdom, he would outlive the Seleucid king by about 4 or 5 years, is what we're being told in verse 8. Verse 9, so the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. So the Ptolemy kingdom would be strong for a while. Verse 10, but his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So in verse 10, we're dealing Ptolemy III defeats Antiochus the Great. So here we have another war between these two descendants, not really descendants, but the successors of the kingdom of Alexander. As we said, there's going to be continuous war between these two groups until the defeat of Greeks by the Romans. So verses 10 through 12, let me continue with verse 11 and 12. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, that is the king of the north, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. So we're talking again about an invasion by the Egyptians of the Seleucid Greeks of the north, which conquered Syria and territories around Syria. So Ptolemy III defeats Antiochus the Great in this great battle, but Antiochus the Great is not killed. So, and we have war and counter war going on here, and that's what Daniel 11 is all about. It's talking about the wars between the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. And then it says, after Antiochus the Great was defeated by Ptolemy III, verse 13, for the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. So Antiochus the Great invades Egypt now and defeats Ptolemy V. Verse 14, and in those times shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So as the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt continues to be under assault, we find that Syria, under the Seleucids, made an alliance with Greece. They united against Egypt in 198 BC. The robbers of thy people is talking about rebellious Judahites who joined with Ptolemy V, but were defeated by the Antiochus the Great. So in this period of time, it's very important to understand that the Israelites of Judah had split loyalties. You had two factions. You had the factions that were pro-Greek, that began to adopt Greek customs and Greek language, and you had the Mosaic faction, which was headed by the Maccabees, and they were the ones loyal to Judah and loyal to the Mosaic law. So within Judah, you had this tension, and actually you have to call it civil war. Civil war between the loyal Judahites and the disloyal Judahites who would have to be called traitors to the Mosaic law. Okay, so let's continue. Verse 15, so the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall be any strength to withstand. So even though the Judahites were more inclined to make leagues with the Egyptians under the Ptolemies, Antiochus the Great made war against them, put a siege engine in place to scale the walls, and defeated the Egyptians. So let's continue. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land by which his hand shall be consumed. This is talking about Antiochus the Great, who set up headquarters in the area of Jerusalem, from which he continued from this point forward, and his successors continued to make war against not only Egypt, but against the other nations in the territory. Verse 17, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. So what happened, the Ptolemaic king of the time, gave his daughter, Cleopatra I, to this Ptolemaic king. To this Seleucid king, Antiochus the Great. But he gave his daughter with the secret intention of having her subvert Antiochus, which it turned out she refused to do. So as it turned out, she loved her husband and wouldn't subvert his kingdom on behalf of her father, Ptolemy IV. So we have all kinds of intrigue going on here. And unless you know this type of history about the relationship between the king of the south, that is the Ptolemaic kings, Greek kings of Egypt, and the Seleucid northern king of the north, Seleucid kingdom of Alexander's successors, then you really can't understand what this book is talking about. So, in other words, he failed to have her subvert Antiochus the Great. Okay, and let's continue here, verse 18. After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. This is talking about Antiochus turning against Greece and making a war against Greece. But Scipio the Roman defeated Antiochus the Great at the Battle of Magnesia, and thus Antiochus the Great had to return to his headquarters in Antioch, which is covered by verse 19. Then he shall turn his force toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So he returned to Antioch in 187 BC, where he died. Verse 20. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes. This is the famous raiser of taxes in verse 20 here. In the glory of the kingdom. And this raiser of taxes was Seleucus IV, the son of Antigonus the Great. And he was forced to raise taxes in order to pay tribute to the Romans. Okay? And then later on, at the end of this verse, within a few days shall he be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. And that's because he was assassinated by Heliodorus. And so the Seleucus IV, the raiser of taxes, didn't last very long. And he was raising taxes of the people in the area, including the people of Jerusalem, whatever area that Antiochus the Great was able to conquer and control. The Romans exacted tribute of those people through Seleucus IV. Verse 21. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. This vile person is Antiochus Epiphanes, who ruled the area from 175 BC to 163 BC. Verse 22. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. So in verse 22, we're talking about Antiochus Epiphanes defeated all the competitors that were around in the area and set up his own kingdom. And speaking of the people of Judah, that is the prince of the covenant, what he did was he deposed Onias, who was the high priest of Jerusalem, and installed Jason, who had bribed Epiphanes with a great sum of money to install Jason in the high priesthood. So here we have the first instance of an outside king messing with the priesthood. So we have Antiochus Epiphanes placing Jason in the high priesthood in place of Onias, to whom the position rightfully belonged. So that's what verse 22 is talking about here. Verse 23. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. So he will increase in power. And in addition, he was bribed by Menelaus. So after Jason bribed Epiphanes and was installed in place of Onias, Menelaus came along and bribed Epiphanes with an even larger sum of money, and therefore Epiphanes replaced Jason with Menelaus. Verse 24, he shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches, and yea, he shall forecast his devices, or shall make false treaties, deceptive treaties, against the strongholds, even for a time. So it's just telling us his modus operandi, how he's going to deal with his conquered territories. At this time also he annexed Coele-Syria, Palestine, and Phoenicia. And he divided the spoils of war among his constituents in the various nations in order to keep them under control. In other words, to bribe them, to make sure they don't rebel against him.